And now what you have is a current condition and a target condition, and it's a shorter delta. And now the beautiful thing of experimentation begins. We are running experiments. How fast, how good can I get from the current condition to the target condition? Bridge that. And once I achieve that, I'm going to redo the same thing, navigating slowly to the challenge. So that is the entire pattern of thinking, and that's scientific thinking. But it's really the pattern and the deliberate practice that is combined, and that makes the Agile Kata unique.
Hey everyone, I'm Debbie Madden, the host of Scaling Tech Podcast, and today I'm chatting with Joe Krebs about Agile Kata. Hey Joe, how are you?
Hi, thank you. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I'm really excited to have this talk. Before we jump in, for anyone out there that doesn't know Joe, I've known Joe for quite a long time. Joe is the creator of Agile Kata and the Agile Kata Pro certification program. We're going to talk all about what that is. Before Agile Kata, Joe has been in the community. Many of you, I'm sure, know him. He's a lifelong learner, host of the Agile.fm podcast. He's an author, a certified trainer who certifies many of us, Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, and leaders. And he's delivered his Agile curriculum to thousands of professionals. Many of us have been to events that Joe has put on over the last 20 years. I've been to many of those. And he's the founder of Incrementor, which is an Agile coaching and training company dating back to 2009. And 3 years in a row, Incrementor made the prestigious Inc. 5000 list. So
Right.
An impressive background, all leading to our topic today. So I did not know what Agile Kata is. I'm assuming many others don't yet know what it is. So tell us in your own words, and I'll ask you some questions along the way, but what is Agile Kata?
Well, that's a big question because I'm writing a book about this, right? But in a nutshell, if we're trying to do this in a short podcast, Agile Kata is a super interesting pattern. I would describe it as a pattern, not so much of a process. Although you could say it's a process, it's a sequence of steps you're walking through, and it comes out of the term comes out of martial arts, where you would be like kata, you would be doing like a way of doing certain things. And you would be practicing these forms. And it's a combination of a thinking pattern, right, to learn, is also combined with deliberate practice. So you're combining these two things together. And there's scientific evidence out there that our brain, even our adult brain, not only kids in school, learn that way and can also change patterns of thinking by applying this kata. So it comes down to you can see it as a pattern for change management towards any kind of agility. So I came across it. This is not a new topic of kata. It comes out of Toyota. It comes out of Lean. So it has a long, long history of that. But what's I believe is missing, right, is a link between the Agile and the kata thinking. And that's what I'm trying to build a bridge between these two topics. And I want to expose to the Agile community how cool kata is and, what you can do with it. So you can basically, the use cases for that is Agile transformations, business agility to be increased, or you can use it as a team process, or you can use it as a very simple example for everybody doing Scrum possibly out there. You can use it as a tool to implement or follow through on impediments or retrospective ideas. So very granular, but also on a large scale, the pattern applies.
I'm an Agilist. Many listening have been, Agilists or, partial Agilists, non-dogmatic, dogmatic. We've got all flavors for a long time. If I were to start to use the Agile Kata and kind of connect the process and the way of thinking, how would I take a first step? Is there, I know you're going to write about this in your book, which is, we're going to link to it in the show notes, but I'll just kind of say now agilecatabook.com is where people can sign up to get the book and be on the wait list. But what's step one for me if I'm running an Agile team and I want to start using this approach?
Yeah, so that's great. There's 4 steps, and the kata is actually the starting point, not the. It's not the goal is not to memorize this and to do it like long term. It's actually the starting point of everything. And then the kata will actually lead you to other things, which is actually a very positive thing because you can drive this agile kata in your organization in a way that you starting taking to ownership. So it's very different than, for example, Scrum, where you would be like learning a specific process and you would say, now we're applying this process. And the goal is to apply that. A kata is one of the starting point of the thinking. So for example, in Agile Kata, the challenge would be, let's say you're facing a situation within your team or something to be improved in your organization with the mindset of increasing agility. And the Agile Kata would start with defining like what's your goal? What are you trying to achieve? What is your longer term, not a North Star. It's not like a goal that's far, far out. It's actually something where you would say this is something to be accomplished maybe in 6 to 9 months. I don't even want to say 6. I want to say up to 9 months. So it's like
Okay.
this kind of window, not too long, but also not too short. And it should be a challenge. And that's also a little bit different because then other processes out there where you would be like, okay, here's the plan, here's what we're trying to achieve. The challenge might be a big goal for the team to actually say, we don't even know if we're going to achieve this. It's not clear in the beginning to achieve this. And that creates like the spirit of experimentation, which we're going to come to in a sec. So with that goal in mind, that's great. A lot of teams would then implement and say, let's go, right? Let's let's go and apply and do training and coaching and all of those things. The kata actually takes a step back and says, with a direction in mind, where are you today? So it actually takes a very quick step back, and it's also very new, to assess the situation where you are. You might think you're slowing things down by just taking a few days maybe out of your calendar and say like assessing where you currently are. But only then you know how big the delta is.
Mm-hmm.
And with that delta now, you can say, okay, the goal is too far ahead and it's unknown if we're going to achieve it in one step. What could be a small step we can take? So now you're defining a target condition, and that is something that might be a few days out, might be a week out, maybe 2, but it's not a sprint. It's not something where you would say a time box, anything like that. It's just like how fast can we get to this target condition? And now what you have is a current condition and a target condition, and it's a shorter delta. And now the beautiful thing of experimentation begins. We are running experiments. How fast, how good can I get from the current condition to the target condition, bridge that. And once I achieve that, I'm going to redo the same thing, navigating slowly to the challenge. So that is the entire pattern of thinking, and that's scientific thinking. But it's really the pattern and the deliberate practice that is combined, and that makes the Agile Katas unique.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you 2 questions
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, and then we can dive in. But my curiosity is how, when Agile Kata is functioning, high functioning, how does this integrate with 2 things that many of us are using today, which is Scrum and OKRs?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I know the answer to how it fits into Scrum, but I'm not sure I know yet how it fits into OKRs. But because you talked upon Scrum, right? Which the Agile Kata is the intention and the challenge, and then the Scrum is kind of like the week to week, like what you're doing day in and day out to get there. Is that fair? Or tell me more about that.
Yeah, there's 2 use cases. So one of them you're absolutely right. So there's a way of combining the Agile Kata with Scrum. So a Scrum team can say we're going to continue with Scrum as is, no change whatsoever. But many Scrum teams, struggle with, for example, in a retrospective, after they identified a high priority item to improve, how to actually implement this, right? So it's great that we found that, and it's great that we have it, but how, like very practical, how do I implement that in my organization, in my team? That would be a great use case now for the Agile Kata to run it parallel to Scrum. And I think that's a wonderful process. And for everybody listening, doing Scrum, that's a very easy one to actually try. Agile Kata thinking within a team or within a Scrum organization. The other one is, the second use case I see is to actually use the Agile Kata instead of Scrum. So that would be a use case where a team would actually say, like, we have practiced Scrum for a long period of time. There has to be maybe some fatigue around Scrum. They need a boost. They want to try something new. And if you really think about those 4 steps we just talked about, they could be also related to a product, right? So they could be related to what strategy, what's your product goal, where are you right now in your product, where do you want to be in a short period of time, and what are your experiments? And the experiments could be AI supported, they could be through coaches supported, they could be outside of the box thinking, they could be multiple teams. But this looks very different than you would think in a Scrum environment. But those are the 2 use cases I currently see, and I know they are being applied as we speak.
Now, for those use cases,
Hmm.
who are you finding is often the champion of bringing Agile Kata to the org? Is it someone inside a tech team? Is it executive? Can it be either? Like, where are you seeing it? Where are you seeing the internal champions originate?
Well, so the champions in terms of support are definitely is leadership team. You do
Okay.
need leadership support to try something like this. The Kata, to bring in Kata as an experiment in the first place. I think you definitely need leadership support. But we do also see Agile Kata as a grassroots movement, right? We see teams that have experienced Scrum for a long time saying, like, we are ready to try something new. Um, Maybe short term, maybe long term. They might not know at that point when they're trying something new, but they feel like the time is right. Those are the very experienced Scrum teams out there that feel like maybe we want to try something different. So Kata doesn't have a team boundary like Scrum, doesn't have a master, doesn't have a product owner. And those things can continue to exist, but they might evolve over time. And that's the beauty of the Kata, is that it evolves over time rather than being static within a specific rule book. So a lot of teams see a lot of potential in that and say like, hey, we work in a very basic pattern, but around that we can do whatever we want to do. So for example, mob programming, pair programming, all these dynamic reteaming, all of those things, open space, all those things go hand in hand with self-organized, self-managed kata teams. So yeah, it's an interesting concept for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, so that I want to talk about the second part of that question I had asked, which is, given what you just said, um, how does Agile Kata fit in with OKRs? And
Right.
we may not know all of the answer to that yet as people
Uh-huh.
find different use cases, but where do you think Agile Kata fits in with OKRs? Which, again,
Yeah.
sometimes Scrum teams have OKRs, sometimes organizations, sometimes
Mhm.
it's all over the place within an org. So,
Yeah.
what's your thinking on that?
Well, especially if it's on an organizational level with the OKRs, I think the OKRs as a tool can nicely work with Agile Kata. So this, we want to measure obviously what is our target condition. We want to measure what is our current condition. We want to have some form of parameters of where we want to go, and OKRs are just going hand in hand with Agile Kata. So there's nothing prescriptive about how do we want to navigate to this. So they go hand in hand. And the same is true for, by the way, just to give you an alternative, evidence-based management, same thing, right? So it's an alternative technique that could also be included. So there's a series of tools and techniques that can, support the Agile Kata practitioners, and that's also nice. We're looking flight levels, we're looking at unfix. There's a lot of things going on right now in the Agile community where we feel like Agile Kata can help not only implement OKRs, we can use Agile Kata to implement OKRs, but also to use OKRs if somebody wants to drive organizational change with OKRs and the Agile Kata.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. So again, going back to, a lot of folks that listen to Scaling Tech are on tech teams, and many use some version of Scrum and some version of OKRs or something similar. So how do I assess if my team needs Agile Kata? Like,
Mhm.
let's say for 2024, how do I,
Yeah,
is this a priority for me? Can I wait? Can I not wait? Is there
yeah.
any sort of tool or thinking, because a lot of tech teams right now, they're going through a period of change. Like, a lot of teams are
Oh,
downsizing, a lot of teams are starting to use generative AI. There's a lot of change.
a lot of change. Yes.
And so how do I assess
Yeah.
how important Agile Kata is to my team?
Yeah, it's an awesome question because what's happening is, for somebody considering Agile Kata, I think one of the big questions I would ask is, how often has for example, if we're talking about a Scrum team, for example, right? We could that replace that with any Agile process, right? But how many times has my process changed in recent months or years? Um, if so, right, what's the frequency here? Because I think that is also an important piece to bring up. So a lot of Scrum teams, we see a lot of you see meetups on what is it, Scrum therapy. So one, I see a lot of self-help group and how to zombie Scrum and all of those things. And for me, as somebody who is a professional Scrum trainer, right, I know that some of those teams, they struggle with introducing Scrum in their organization, or at least to evolve Scrum within the organization. If Scrum hasn't changed, maybe that's an angle to say like, well, if we're not changing, the world is changing around us, so something has to adapt. And so the Agile Kata would be a starting point for that. But any assessment tools you might have, obviously, Agile Kata would say every assessment tool you have is a solid one, as long as it is something that measures the 12 principles of the Agile Manifesto, because that is really what drives Agile. So we're saying like the term Agile is not just a loose term of saying like we're flexible and nimble. Agile means something, and that's according to the Agile Manifesto. So we want to see any kind of metrics, any kind of data points when we're assessing the current condition. Also, when we're defining the target condition, we want to see it somehow in sync with those principles.
Okay, that's helpful. And
Okay.
then so I want to kind of close this conversation out with the all right, so Agile Kata, it's new to many of us. You're going to help us by writing this book, and then that will
Yeah.
guide us. But in the meantime, um, how, let's say if I'm curious about implementing Agile Kata, how do I know if I can go it alone or if I need someone like you, right,
Oh,
to coach me through this process? Like, how do I, because I think it's similar to when you might need an agile coach or an executive coach,
mhm.
or when you bring in any third party to help you, be at the top of your game in something that,
Yes.
having a coach is going to be your guide. But how
Yeah.
do how do we know when really we're looking to like say, all right, this is interesting, we want to explore, and then we can really use some outside help. How do we
Yeah.
assess
So it's interesting, right? Because Kata out of Toyota had always been supported by coaching. So
that? Oh,
at any
okay.
given point at Toyota, there was a one-to-one association between a learner and a coach.
Mm,
And the coach was a supervisor. And obviously, that is something that is a little bit in conflict with the self-managing aspect of Agile. So we're seeing more relationship in Agile Kata between an Agile coach and a team. And that team is self-managing. But we do want to hold on to the association that there is an Agile coach helping the team through not only setting these target and current conditions, but also to help through the experiments, helping on a daily coaching cycle to help the teams on a day-to-day basis. So what we're doing right now is actually we're started this program, the Agile Kata Pro program, and where we actually have trainers around the world teaching Agile Kata to teams, to organizations, to leaders, everybody who would like to learn about this scientific thinking pattern and how this could possibly help increase agility. But the end state is obviously to help bring in Kata thinking into an organization so that they can help themselves over time. In the beginning, there will definitely be an interest in agile coaching that people know the kata. It's like the same as if you want to become better in tennis. Let's say you're not going to go to a coach, right? You go to a tennis coach, right? So, and that's the same for kata. So you need to build a practice. And for that practice, there's definitely coaching necessary to reinforce the thinking pattern within an organization.
got it. And agilecata.pro is where people can go, correct? To
That's
find
correct.
yes,
Yeah.
Agile Kata coaches.
That's where they can find my trainings, but they can also find trainings from all the other certified trainers. There's a program. We really want to, by providing these kind of trainings, we really want to help elevate the level and the awareness of Kata thinking and scientific thinking within around the world. That's why it's around the world in several languages, and people can learn about it. It's a one-day session. But we're also thinking about another session that goes a little bit deeper. So there's more to, yeah.
That's great. Well, this has been fascinating. I'm so glad I know more about Agile Kata than I did before this conversation.
Awesome.
Thank you for taking the time. And like I said to everyone listening and watching, the two places where you want to go to learn more are agilecata.pro and to sign up for Joe's book, agilecatabook.com. And we'll put those below. And thanks, Joe. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Debbie.
All right. Bye.